everyone. I call the special budget session to order. We have a roll call, please, Beth?
Mayor Kavanaugh?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Leger? Here. Councilmember Magazine?
Here.
Councilmember Yates?
Present.
Councilmember Hanson?
Here.
And Councilmember DePorter.
Here.
All right, thank you. And we only have one item, which is the budget, discussion with possible direction related to the proposed Town of Fountain Hills fiscal year 2015-16 budget, including all proposed revenues, expenditures, and programs for all government funds. Just like to let anyone in the public to know that we are going to take public comment, but it's going to be after the presentation. So just hang on to whatever you want to say and listen to all the discussion first, and it'll guide you in your questions. But we'll get to everything at the end. And Ken's going to start with our presentation.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, good evening. We're here to discuss a proposed town manager's budget to the mayor and town council for the fiscal year 2015-16 year beginning July 1 and ending in June 30th of 2016. Tonight, maybe some protocol and some housekeeping. As I go through the slides, please feel free as the council to ask questions on each slide. We can jot those down. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll ask for the, as Mayor Kavanaugh indicated, public comment regarding any items regarding the budget, and then open it up to the council on any deliberations that they would have regarding the budget process. So let me begin by saying, again, we always show that the budget is an instrument of implementation of many things, and that it started with our it's part of our strategic planning process. It is one of the implementation tools of that, and we always have, as part of our strategic plan, the mission, vision, and values. As you know, and I won't go through this and read it to you, because it has been on the website many years, and it's in your packet that I'm sure you've already read, but it's the mission statement as well as our vision statement and our value statement, and these have all been predominantly our guiding light on what we value and what our mission is for the organization, for the local government, for the community. To get into some financial discussions, we've had some discussions about that, and if you have any questions as we go, feel free to ask the finance director or I any questions that you might have. As you can see, that we're looking into the 5-year future, and what you can see by this matrix is that the operating revenue, actually the operating expenditures are going, what we feel could possibly outweigh the available revenue sources that we have. And as you can see by those numbers, that by that chart, is that we actually have an estimate of between 2015 to 2020. There's well over $1 million that we think that we are going to experience in the revenue side of our general fund. And now remember, our general fund is made up, 88% of it is made up either through revenue sharing program through the state of Arizona that gives us, based on per capita, on our head count of what our population is, based on income tax and sales tax, as well as our highway user revenue funds. The other is our local sales tax. So 88% of our revenue in the general fund comes from just those two areas. As you can see with the general fund revenues, like I said, it's approximately a little over $1 million that we think we're going to advance in the next 5 years, or over the coming 5 years, and that the expenditures we think are going to, because of some fixed costs that we have, and I will get into those a little later, of some increases plus another factor that's involved that we actually discussed at our last council meeting, and that's the mid-decade census. That could have some impacts on us as well. We don't know what they are today, but we think that along the way, there's going to be some form of an impact in revenue. State shared revenues, as you can see there, that we're actually looking at about about $500,000 increase in our state shared revenues over the next 5 years on that again, but that census, the mid-decade census, could have an impact on it. The local sales tax, we're looking at about a $600,000 increase in revenue over the next 5 years. Now, as I mentioned earlier, those two sources of revenue are 88% of our general fund. And well over half of the money is public safety expense in the general fund itself. I would like to point out another thing, our highway user revenue of the years of the transfers that has been going from the cities and towns portions of highway user revenue funds back to the state. And this is a statistic from the statistics from the municipal policy statement from the Arizona League of Cities and Towns that's been charting this since the year 2000. And as you'll see, it's a pretty significant number in there. And it has had an effect. Frankly, we don't have enough money to effectively operate our highway user, our street programs, from the operation standpoint, as well as adequate funding for our maintenance of our 390 lane miles of road that we have in the community, and which equates to 3.5 million square feet of asphalt that we're responsible for taking care of. As you can see, and this is pretty much as a chart that basically shows you the 1.4 million that you can see on is the highway user revenue portion. This part is the VLT, which is the vehicle license tax that goes to the pavement maintenance program that we expect. Now, a portion of this funding, $250,000, will be matched with this to do this year's ongoing maintenance program, which is Zone 1, which is the northeast quadrant of town. We'll talk about that in a future slide as well. Just to show you that we do have some budget assumptions for this fiscal year 16, and as you can see, no projected staff increases except for one that possibly in 17. We're looking at MCSO increases of 10% this year, which is the same number of percentage that we had last year as well. Last year's budget was 10% increase. I'll get into that when we talk about public safety. As you can see, the rural metro is approximately 3%. The election costs were reduced. That should be, I'm sorry we didn't make a correction on that one, but that number right there, I keep pushing the wrong one, sorry. That number actually was taken away and put over in contingency and was removed because, well, we had it in contingency, but we removed it because of the $48,000 required for the TPT, or the Transaction Privilege Tax Administration on Construction Sales Tax, that we're going to pay the Arizona Department of Revenue to administer the program for us. So as you can see, this matrix is really the reflection of some of the other charts that we just showed on those numbers. Again, feel free to, if you have any questions. Debt overview, we always want to be able to show what our debt is for the community, and you'll see that it's $13 million. $13 million, and that was the inclusion of the Saguaro Boulevard bond, general obligation bond that was included to this year, as opposed to, I think it was $8 million last year. let's talk a little bit about, as I alluded to earlier, the operational priorities and the strategic planning goals. As you know, the council had a retreat in January and determined that there were 7 items that were still of priority that we needed to emphasize. As you can see, it's pavement management program, the economic development plan, the rural metro contract negotiations, the solid waste services contract, the Saguaro Boulevard project to be completed, Fire Station 2 consideration for relocation, and an environmental fee that the council directed to begin implementation of. These are the things I just mentioned that were listed out for that. The strategic planning goals in consideration of the recommendations by the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission. There were, I believe, 9 goals that we use as a guiding document to help begin discussion with budget implementation. And as you can see, between the operational priorities and the strategic planning goals, there are some overlaps that go in there because those operational priorities do assist with the implementation of the strategic goals themselves. This is the list of the strategic goals that are priorities for this coming year. Obviously, promote a mixed-use downtown, promote a business expansion retention program with economic development, identify a slate of economic development tools and strategies, reliable source of funding for infrastructure maintenance, adequate infrastructure and amenities for downtown development, solicit public stakeholder feedback, implement communications plan for civic involvement, continue to evaluate customer satisfaction on a regular basis, as well as communicate the role of local government. Those were the strategic planning goals that were adopted for this year. And as we go through the budget, you'll see a correlation of a number of projects that relate to that. So tonight, in a nutshell, to help the council as well as the public, we're looking at a town manager's recommended budget of $37,954,031. Now, that's less than what the current year, only because of our capital projects that we have budgeted. As you can see here on a 6-year review of what the total budgets were during those fiscal years. This year we're in was $44.8 million. Again, we had 2 major projects that were in there that were budgeted for. This year, because those projects overlap into the fiscal year, this year was actually going to be less because of there was $22 million in capital projects that were slated for the fiscal year we're in today. But July 1, we're looking at approximately $14 million capital program, and I'll elaborate those in future slides. So tonight we're going to talk again the budget highlights, some general statements about the budget highlights, the core services that we are as an organization. That means that we're public safety, which is fire, emergency medical services, law enforcement, judicial, admin, which is town manager's office, town clerk's office, legal services, human risk management, finance, information technology, economic development, volunteer program. In the development services, their wide span is building safety, code enforcement, engineering, streets, stormwater, environmental services, facility maintenance, mapping and graphics and planning. And then community services is parks, recreation, tourism, senior services, community center, open space, and trails. Talk a little bit about the capital improvement program that's recommended, the fee schedule and a few minor changes that we have there, as well as the personnel that we have, and a rundown of that, what we have that does the work for us. So with budget highlights, I'd like to start by saying that, you know, it's continued new reality. Again, we're not as much a growth community as we have been in the past decade. We're not really, we don't have that much revenue coming in because of the growth that was at that time going on in many communities, many government entities during that time. Again, but there's a new reality after the Great Recession that hit us all. The adherence to the state-imposed expenditure limitation law, I wanted to bring it up this year because I think it's relevant that everyone, we do have some new council members. We haven't really talked about that, but that's a law that is actually is a combination of both the state constitution and state laws. It's basically state-imposed expenditure laws that have been on the books for 35 years, since 1980. The revenue projections are determined using both on the trends analysis formula. In other words, we look back at where we're at and where we think we're going. A little change in the distribution of state shared revenues, as I mentioned earlier. There's very little change in that. Maintaining existing levels of service, although challenging. No new programs and no new employees are recommended in this proposed budget. Inflation factors is between 2.5 to 3.5 for administration, development services, and community services departments in future years. Public safety contracts for MCSO has a 10% increase this year as we did last year. Rural Metro has a 3% as part of their contract with us annually. And then again, the transaction privilege tax, construction sales tax revenue included in the projections.
Ken?
Those impacts of recent legislation is unknown at this time.
Ken, we have a question here.
Yes.
From Vice
Ken, I know at the bottom it says the impact of recent legislation is unknown at this time. Has it progressed to the point we have a feel for what this is going to do to us?
Really, we don't have a feel for it. It's the Department of Revenue is still trying to put all this together. They're still formulating their administration on this. We do know that we're going to pay $48,000 to them to administer that program, but we don't know what the impact is at this time. And we might have to feel our way through, to be honest with you. I can't give you a definitive number.
Okay, it was, what, a year or so ago when they decided they were going to start playing with the transaction privilege tax, and they implemented it and then immediately withdrew it. Is this the same type of episode? Are they going to actually try to go through with this and implement it?
Yes.
Crazy. Thank you.
State-imposed expenditure limitation. Let me touch on this briefly. Again, it's in the state constitution, and it's also part of the Arizona Revised Statutes. And the law requires the Economic Estimates Commission to provide an amount of the state-imposed expenditure limitation in February of each year to each community. And the calculations are based on the gross deflator, implicit price deflator, adjusted for inflation and population change in the community. And in the law, there are also 13 exemptions that apply to local funds, such as bonds, grants, intergovernmental agreements, to name a few. And it gets very complicated very fast on what's exempt and what's not exempt. But because we're fairly close to our exempt, our expenditure limitation number that the EEC gave us, we took a few of those projects out, and I'll explain those later. But all of them can be rebudgeted in July of 16 to effectively implement some construction, some capital projects. But again, it's a draconian law that basically says you can only spend this much, and it was started based on a base expenditure law of 1979, 1980. Everyone knows, remember, we were in recession years. Those years, we were in double-digit inflation, and expenditures across the board in all the communities and all local governments were down. So it started off with a very low number. There are adjustments that you can, if you don't like the expenditure limitation, you can go to other alternatives, and I believe there are 5 of them. And within those 5, the most common was a home rule option, which you would go to take it to the voters to tell you that this is the numbers that we feel based on our revenue estimates on what we can do. Fountain Hills has never had to do that. We've never had to go down that path as an alternative expenditure format. Many of the other communities in Arizona have done that and gone and done their own alternative expenditure limitation. We haven't done that, but for this year, for some reason with the numbers, we're getting close to that. Now, I would suspect that next year, because of some of the capital projects that are going to go down, I think that that number is going to go down further, that we're not going to be as close to that maximum number that we can expend. So I'm not really concerned about it in the future. But I did want to bring it up so that at least the council and the public understands that there's a law out there, it's both in the Constitution and in revised statutes, that we have that affects local governments, and it's been around for 35 years. Now, again, we've been fortunate we haven't had to deal with it as much. But there might come a time where that formula does address us, just because of all those exemptions and what's not exempted. And if we look at other revenue sources in the future, that kind of thing, that are not exempted, it could bump up against this. So I want everybody to understand this going forward. Again, after review of those main areas, we face some reductions in the budget that could be authorized for expenditures in the capital improvement plan for 15-16. But in order to comply, we thought we'd take them out a little bit. And I'll explain those in a little bit because there's another slide on it. So we just want to make sure that the coming budget, 15-16, is well in conformance with this constitutional provision. And the ones we took out are the Adero Canyon Trailhead, the Shea Boulevard eastbound lane project, the Unpaved Valley project, and the Intelligent Transportation System grant that we have, that all can be effectively budgeted for July 1 of 16-17. That 1.9, in talking with MCO, I think the discussions with MCO today, that we're not going, per the development agreement, settlement agreement that we have with MCO Properties that's doing Adero, that we're not going to actually be able to be in there until they're finished with that road that goes to the trailhead site. And we're not going to be able to do that, as we understand, until the summer of 16. But we do have money in there as part of that project to finish up the 100% plans and start the bidding process and get that started so that when we budget for it in 16-17, July 1, we'll be ready to go. And that's been the plan. These other ones can effectively, we could get to those projects, but we have other priority capital projects that need to be completed first before we even get to these. So we went ahead and deferred those to July of 16-17. The other highlights include continued focus on adequate funding for the core services I mentioned earlier with a structurally balanced budget. In other words, a balanced budget with the available revenues that we have and the expenditures both balance. There were 6 new employee positions that were requested, and as you can see where they were. Unfortunately, that's a considerable number with $325,000 for those positions, and there was absolutely no way that we would have any kind of revenue of that nature to consider any new employees, as much as, and in some places, so those places are needed. There is a recommendation for 2.5% adjustment to the salary plan for our employees, and I'll elaborate that in further discussions in further slides. That total cost is $63,822 in the budget. I'm sorry for the font, but again, there were a number of core service requests over the revenue that we had, and at the development, as you can see with the core services, those are the areas that ended up being cut. Just to name a few in there, we had a number of parking lots that needed to have some maintenance to it. Those are being deferred. Reduced funding for facilities replacement fund, we reduced that number. Community services, we had some recreation activities that were eliminated, and we had deferred repairs in a number of our parks, as well as replacement of our ballroom chairs, which are probably next to our HVAC and our plumbing and everything in the community center. That's probably some of the most things we use, but we could stand to defer that for another year. In administration, we had some numbers there, a comp and class study that we need to talk about, classification compensation study to keep in keeping with our competition that's out there for our employees, because all the other entities are doing that now, to do the same thing. We have reduced funding in economic development, but it's not really reduction. It was just a excise tax redistribution of funds. We used to have a 60-40 split of the money between downtown strategy and the business attraction tourism area. We went to an 80-20 this fiscal year. That actually kept the same amount of money that's there that we previously had for economic development for that, because we had to reduce the general fund subsidy from $90,000 to $50,000, but that 80-20 kept the same numbers that were there. Is it enough? Like I say about all of our services, no, it's not. We don't have enough marketing in there, but that's still, we have what we have. The capital request deferred due to the state-imposed expenditure limitation. We had a few of those, as I mentioned and just highlighted a minute ago.
Ken, can I
Yes.
stop you there? As related to Movies in the Park and the music festival, one thing that we've been trying to do is to attract young families, families with children, and the two movies in the park, which come to a little over $8,000. I think that is an amenity that is really something that our families have enjoyed. It is the only free amenity in the park for young children. And I know that it was started by a volunteer, Natalie Barella, and it's been very successful. Our last movie in the park, our park was just filled, not only with children and parents, but grandchildren, and it's just a great hometown event. And I would like to see that put back in the budget, along with the music festival. The one thing I hear is that, why can't we have music every Sunday like they do up in Cave Creek? Because we all go up to Cave Creek to hear the music. Well, we can't do it, financially, we can't do it every Sunday like they do up in Cave Creek, but we did have this one music festival, which at least it's a one-time event that's free. It was very well attended. I think it could be a very successful annual event, and I would also like to have that put back in the budget, and that's $5,000 for that. So I'm talking about $13,250, and I would suggest it comes out of our contingency fund. And if anyone would like to jump in the discussion, Councilman DePorter?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to echo that. I received quite a few emails about it, but I also thought about it the second I saw the budget. Not because selfishly, I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we frequent the movies in the park. There are, Natalie corrected me, there are over 1,000 people who attend those events. It's a fantastic community event that draws so many, and I just wanted to echo what you said, Mayor, about that and the music festival being what I see a relatively small investment in the whole for getting a lot of value addition for our community. So if there is room in the contingency fund, I would suggest it out of that as well. If not, I'm happy to dig for $13,250 with you, with everybody else if they're willing.
Okay.
Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
Thank you, Mayor. Ken, the $55,000 that you had budgeted for the election and then said, that's not in there, you moved it over for $48,000 for the TPT.
We eliminated it because of the 48.
But then it came back up in $48,000. I guess the question is the delta of that, the $8,000, was that lost in translation or that's just used somewhere else?
Just part of contingency.
Okay, so it's in contingency. All right, I was going to suggest that that $8,000 savings we put towards the movie in the park, so, okay,
Well,
thank you.
the other option is the $23,548 that we received back from MCSO as an overpayment. I know that Ken was thinking about all of the other wants that could possibly be used for that money, but I think that's also a source for the 13,000. Anyone else have any? Councilman Leger?
Yes, Mayor, I agree with you and was planning on making a motion to restore that. I think the only thing we may be having a difference of opinion on possibly is where that money would be coming from. And an idea I had, because I think our contingency, as we all well know, is pretty low, and we rely on that throughout the year. But, we have a reserve fund. It's the it's the Downtown Strategy Fund. And the Downtown Strategy Fund has $525,000 in it. And that is that 20% of the 1/10% of the excise sales tax, and it's there primarily to enhance vibrancy in the downtown area. As a matter of fact, as we well know, we use that for Christmas lights. We've used it in the past for things related to the greening project, so forth and so on. I think that it would be painless to take that $13,250 from there rather than contingency, and of course, we can discuss that further. So that's another option. Thank you.
Anyone else want to discuss it?
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
Thank you, Mayor. I had asked this earlier in several budgets in the past. We have several, what's called a gross lease out there for some of our folks, including the community theater, the Kiwanis. And I had asked, and we might need a day to find out where the lease terms are. Are we in or does anyone know, are we on month-to-month with those lease terms, or are we in the middle of a long-term lease?
Yes, we asked Raymond to grab the
Thank you, Andrew.
Mayor, Councilman Yates, the lease for the community theater is a 5-year lease each term, and they're renewable every March on that 5th year. So they started in 2010, and then 2015 it will be the next lease. I don't have that lease with me. I don't have a copy. I don't know where that's at. So it should be renewed this year. The one for the Kiwanis is for 25 years, and that started in 1994.
Gotcha. So, Madam Mayor, if I may, so is it an automatic renewal, or we have to ratify a new lease? So, for example, the community theater, it's up for renewal, but March
Yes.
of 2015?
Yes, they're required to send in a request to renew the lease, and then we'll just ratify that lease.
Okay. Madam Mayor, if I may, to echo what Councilman Magazine put out, so it's a gross lease, correct? I'm sorry, gross lease, everything's included. We pay for everything.
No, we do not. We pay for the major repairs on the buildings, the roofs, the HVAC, the water coming into the building, but they're responsible for the minor repairs inside the building and any changes that they would like to do. For the Kiwanis building, it's basically the same thing, but we take care of all their electric and the water.
When you say sorry, Mayor, when you say they're electric, we pay their utility bill?
Correct.
Okay. Obviously, Madam Mayor, where I'm going with this is that I would like to take the opportunity not to strap anyone, but to, especially since we're giving these buildings gratis, or I think for $1, that we restructure these in some sort, what's called a triple net lease, which in essence where the tenant pays for everything in lieu of the roof. Or if we set aside a certain amount of budget, and this is where Councilman Magazine, and I don't want to steal your thunder, is that we adjust whatever that is, that we budget on the maintenance of these buildings based on history, and see if we can find some additional funds in that respect. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilman Magazine?
I just wanted a clarification. It's a 5-year lease, it's renewable every year, meaning it's a 5-year, continuous 5 years.
The lease is for 5 years, and it's renewed on the 5th year.
On 5th year, I misunderstood you.
Councilwoman Hanson?
If we're going to start doing those calculations, I would suggest and request that we include incorporating all of the improvements that the theater has made, or the Kiwanis, either group, have made to the respective buildings as far as improving the value of the property.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Council Lady Hanson that we need to take a deep look at the dollars of the improvements that have been made to the old community center, hence the new community theater. It was, I believe, probably 8 or 9 years ago when they took the main community theater over and completely revised it. It didn't have a fire protection system in it. It didn't, the electrical system was as archaic as you could come by. The entire building was on the verge of needing to be torn down, but the community theater came in and held their hand up and virtually rebuilt the entire building. New bathrooms, new ceilings, rebuilt the entire thing. So that does need to be taken into consideration when this is being looked at.
Okay, Raymond, do you know any of the improvements that were made this year? Major improvements? I think there was a roof.
Mayor, Council, yes, this, well, the past couple of years, we've had to do some repairs to the roof. Most recently, the flat portion of the roof and the awning over the front part of the theater. The last budget year, we replaced all of the parts where the clay tiles are.
Okay. And does that also include the parking lot?
No, we did not do any improvements to the parking lot.
But in the lease, we are also responsible for the parking lot or not?
Correct.
we-
For the
We're,
upkeep?
Yes, we are, and it was requested for some maintenance on it, and we took all the parking lot deferred them, because there was also in parks. Many of the parking lots in the parks need the same thing, but we don't have that kind of money. We're gonna have to start doing sparingly and pick the high priority ones and budget for those first.
Okay, Councilman Magazine.
Am I correct that we did spend about $10,000 to repave the Kiwanis parking lot? Is that not correct?
not in past years.
Any other, Vice Mayor Brown?
And as I would like to mention, if the old community center were still just sitting totally vacant, it would be deteriorating at a rate that we wouldn't be talking about replacing the roof or a little bit of underlayment under the roof tile. That's just normal wear and tear, and if the theater wasn't there, that building might lease out to somebody, and that is a big might. And if it wasn't occupied, it would deteriorate at a rate that it would be worthless in several years. I know the building pretty well.
Yeah, discussion on this before we go on. Anything else on the budget highlights anybody wants us to talk about before we go to the next slide?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, just to point something out. We had, again, $392,000 in requests over available revenues. And that was pretty much with the general fund deficit. And so I went ahead and made what I thought were the necessary cuts. But unfortunately, with those cuts weren't enough. And I required, and I asked the directors to go back and look at the deficit so that they could recommend the further cuts so that I could get it into balance. But I wanted to point something out, that the public safety represents over 50% of that operating budget, and that the deficit needed to be made up from the remaining departments. So we end up having to do more of a 5% further revenue or expenditure reduction to get to those numbers to make a balanced budget. And unfortunately, the movies in the park and the music festival and some of the other things that you saw on that list fell victim to that.
Councilman Magazine.
I'm just going to suggest that to make it a little cleaner, that we actually have a vote on restoring the funds for movies in the park and the music festival.
I believe Ken's going to make notes on all of those stipulations, and then after.
I'd recommend that you make your motions at the end of the presentation,
But
to hold that thought, because you've also got public comment on a number of these things that you're going to want to hear first.
So
and
Ken,
then-
we'll keep
I just jotted it
running
down.
down.
Movie in the park and music festivals. And then we went off on theater and net lease and a few other things.
Okay. Anything else on the budget highlight page before we move to the next one? Okay, move on.
Oh,
Stop.
Again, just to be clear, but you did ask, every department has cut 5% from their already bone.
well, yeah,
Tight
but remember,
budget.
what was, taking public safety off the table from those reductions, what was left had to make up the shortfall to balance the budget.
Just wanted to restate the obvious that we're bone dry. Thank you, Mayor.
Hold on. So, again, the budget also includes a transition from the expenditures that we had in the general fund for the initiation of an environmental fee that will begin estimated to begin in January. And that the public safety increases, again, they total $384,000, which pretty much took any of our increased revenues that we thought we were going to have. I'm not complaining because that's still efficient, high-quality law enforcement and fire services. And 4% increase in the Salt River Project electrical costs that we are going to bear the brunt of, as well as the Chaparral water increase that was awarded by the Arizona Corporation Commission for this coming year as well. So we've got some increases that are fixed, that are in there, and they're going to be fixed over the next 5 years and maybe even increasing on that if the SIB or the Systems Improvement Benefit System still is in effect with Chaparral Water and Arizona Corporation Commission. Those numbers will increase, those percentages. The continued focus on street replacement is still a main priority for repair maintenance. We still have about $7.3 million on those replacements and repair, and that includes Saguaro project and the Shea Boulevard project, as well as a signal light replacement on Palisades Saguaro intersection, and the $1 million that we have from vehicle license tax and HERF for the pavement management program. That will be scheduled for what we call Zone 1, which is the northeast quadrant of town. Other budget highlights include the initiation of a number of other capital projects. I'm not going to get into a number of them. You already know a number of what these projects are. They're a continuation of the Saguaro project because the project went over fiscal year, or is estimated to go over the fiscal year. Shea, we still think with closeout, we'll still go over the July 1. We've got an Ashbrook Wash drainage project, a consideration by the council for Fire Station 2. We have miscellaneous drainage. We have downtown master plan. We have a Fountain Park 6, which is underway right now. And we also have a water quality project that is being considered. Some shoulder paving on Fountain Hills Boulevard. That's a grant. And some participation money from us. Highway Safety Improvement Grant, McDowell Mountain Road repairs. We've got, that portion out north of us, we still have a little over a mile of that road heading out to Rio Verde. And there's one spot in there that we're very concerned about, and it's safety factor. We need to do some repairs on. A signal light, as I mentioned, on Palisades, and then some contingency for any potential cost overruns or unforeseens that are in those projects. This year is $14 million. Last year was $22 million, only because of the projects that we initiated and started.
Councilman Magazine has a question.
Ken, do you recall at the retreat, I'm sure you do, that we eliminated a large number of drainage projects for a variety of reasons? Some of them were so old we didn't know what they were, but some of it had to do with funding as well. Do you remember how many there were or how many were related to funding?
No. Those were really more for the development impact fees at build-out. And that's why we got rid of those, because the development impact fee laws changed, and those were no longer valid.
Okay.
And is there a need for the future to discuss those? Yes, there are.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Ken?
Again, some budget summaries, some graphs, just to kind of give you further information on how to look at the general fund and the other funds that we have, HERF, excise tax, special revenues, debt service, and capital projects. The other further service changes in millions from wages and benefits, maintenance, utilities, contractual services, supplies. This is a different way of looking at the costs that we have from those different service areas. Again, what our supply costs are, what our debt service is, and our internal transfers from internal funds that help make up the projects. The operating budgets, as you can see, from council to general government to court, the development services, community services, fire, emergency, law enforcement, you can see those percentage changes that we have in those budgets. Again, by core service, as you can see at public safety, 7.2 million, administration's 2.6. The downtown, we have $1 million in there. In the fund, development services is 4.6 million. Community services is 2. Now, development services is also HERF, highway user. And debt service, community services is 2.2. We have the debt service funds that we have to pay the debt service on our bonds that we have, as well as special revenue funds and our capital and our internal. That makes up the budget for the 37 million. The reserve balances, we just want to make sure that we want to let you know that this is the money we have in the bank, given the budget that we are proposing tonight on that. So we have about $12.2 million that would be in the bank at the estimated year end at 6/30/2016.
Mayor?
Councilman Leger?
Yes, in our earlier discussion, I was referring to the Downtown Strategy Fund, and that's where that lies, that $525,729. And that's 20% of the 10% of our excise tax. And that's there specifically for things that we were talking about in terms of enhancing vibrancy in the downtown area. And I think that both movies and concerts in the park match that very well, as I stated earlier. Thank you.
Ken, is that balance after the transfer out for the intersection lighting and,
Yes.
okay. Because that was, what, like 477,000?
Yes.
And this is,
No, those are being budgeted for, should the council want to do them.
okay.
Those haven't been determined yet.
Anyone else? Okay.
Just to let you know, 21 different sets of books because of the generally accepted accounting principles and the Arizona budget laws that make up why we have to have those. As you can see, if you look at the top line and go across the general and operating funds, and those are and if you look down that list, it's general fund, it's the public art fund, it's the general internal service funds, and it's the vehicle replacement fund. If you look at special revenues, that goes all the way down that line, and those are restricted funds that can only be used for those areas such as highway user or the downtown strategy fund, as you just mentioned, the economic development fund, all the way down to the Cottonwoods Maintenance District or the environmental fund that's being directed to be created, as well as debt service funds, and those are the revenue bonds for the debt service. It's the general obligation bonds that we have. This is the Eagle Mountain Debt Service and the Municipal Property Corporation that we have that paid for the community center and library and museum building, as well as I think a portion of the McDowell Preserve. And then the capital improvement funds. And a lot of those are the development impact fees and are guided by that, as well as the CIP fund, which is made up of construction sales tax, as well as intergovernmental funds that we have, such as the Shea Boulevard project, or the facilities replacement fund that we created last year so that we could start putting money in there that's available to start looking at, roofs and chillers that we just had to replace for the complex and things like that we're looking at that are going to be needed in the future. And then we have development impact fees. And those are all required to have specific funds by themselves. The 5-year general fund revenue projections, again, by the numbers of what we're looking at. As you can see, that if you want to look at it you can look at it from a chart and a graph, but here's the numbers. on what we think that we're going to be seeing in deficits in the coming years. Again, pavement management, as I mentioned earlier, that's highway user and VLT. Highway user is the brown, and the VLT, which is the maintenance money that's right there for that. And then we also have that little strip right there, which is encroachment fees. Those are fees that when people pay to encroach into the public rights-of-ways, that money is there to be used for that as well. That's $25,000 that we think we're going to get over a 12-month period. So as you can see from another standpoint is that there's the revenues and there's the estimated expenditure charts. And you're going to see that some of the expenditures that we have in what we're perceiving as fixed costs are going to outweigh what we think our revenues are going to be in the future. I still think we're doing the best in the valley. When you take as far as efficiency, when you take the amount of general fund that we have, 13.8, I think it is, and you divide that by the citizenry that we have, I think 23,000, you're going to get about a 61-cent cost per capita for that, and I think that that's pretty much the best in town as far as I'm concerned, when you compare it to the other communities and their costs.
Mayor,
Councilman Magazine has a question.
Ken, back on the previous slide, general fund revenues and expenditures. I understand you can make estimates about income. What's the basis for the estimate on expenditures?
As I previously mentioned in the previous slides, those are from water increases to electrical costs to public safety.
So these are all fixed?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor,
Councilman Yates.
just to shout out that per capita expenditure is incredible, absolutely incredible for the type of services that we provide here in Fountain Hills. And I know it sounds doom and gloom, but considering what little we have, staff is doing an incredible job of stretching the dollar, and that right there tells a little bit of the story. But again, I just don't want that to go unnoticed. That's absolutely incredible. So thank you, Ken and staff.
Don't thank me, thank staff. They're the ones doing it. They're the ones getting the job done.
I'm with you.
Again, pie chart, always got to have a pie chart show,
Okay.
okay? Just to let you know, graphics, there's the organization as we see it, Citizens of Fountain Hills. It's their government. Mayor and council are their representatives. You got an executive assistant that works her finger to the bone for everybody. And then you got 4 appointed positions: presiding judge, town prosecutor, town manager, and town attorney. And then the responsibilities that go below that and who's responsible for those. As you can see, fire and law enforcement are contracted. All the rest of them are the services that we provide as far as our core services. Community services is parks, recreation, community center, senior services and tourism, development, as I mentioned, streets, fleet, engineering, GIS, planning, code enforcement, building safety, facilities, admin, as I mentioned before, finance, IT, human resources, risk management, town clerk and responsibilities there, economic development and volunteer services.
Councilman Magazine has a question.
No, just a comment, if I may.
Comment.
I've only been on council for a few months, but it didn't take me very long to figure out that we have an astonishing staff. Everybody I've come in contact with on any issue, very professional, very knowledgeable, wanting to provide whatever information was necessary. I just can't say enough about the staff that I've dealt with. Also working under very difficult circumstances, where we've reduced the size of the staff so dramatically. Some of the staff I know are doing 2 jobs, 3 jobs, here on weekends and so on. And I just want to thank the staff for their perseverance, for their professionalism.
All right, thank you for that. Ken?
Public safety, just to kind of highlight, as you can see in the fire department, and how it's organized. It is a contract with Rural Metro, does an excellent job for us. 3.5 million, it's Rural Metro, 2-year contract extension to June 2018. Activities include fire suppression, fire prevention, emergency, medical service, building, fire and safety, do inspections on that. CARE program, which is part of their operation, is being discontinued. We are looking at alternatives to as a volunteer program and administered by the fire department to try to do the same things at a reduced cost. Fire service highlights, again, increase in fire budget about $54,000, one-time expenditure capitals and expenditure reductions, which offsets the 3% adjustment. So it's really only about 1.6% increase overall, budget-wise. And as you can see, the different areas from fire administration to fire safety, the emergency medical services, fire suppression, on what those increases and what those changes in those budgets are from that.
Vice Mayor Brown's question.
Ken, maybe I'm missing the mark here, but what happened to the funding for CARE?
Again, it was Chief Roberts, you maybe can help me on this too. $25,000 I think we added to the contract for them to administer the CARE program. We started looking at the numbers and we're concerned, and I know that in discussion with the chief that we looked at different alternatives to do that. We thought that maybe a volunteer program could be equally as effective for what's being used out of that on that side of it. So we're talking about the reduction of that money out of the contract and working with volunteer services and our volunteer coordinator in working with the fire department to do that. And Randy could expand a little bit more on that.
Mayor and Council, we've had about 7 years of experience now with our crisis team. And the first 5 years was totally volunteer, and then the last 2 years we had a part-time coordinator paid through Rural Metro. And our volunteer group has gone down quite a bit to the point where the responses were not being answered adequately. So we thought we had a chance for a reset, and then our coordinator resigned last month. So this is a chance for us to kind of recreate the program, bring it back as a total volunteer program, and I think we can maybe make it easier for volunteers to be part of the program. And I think we can still cover what we need to do purely volunteer, and it'll save about $30,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Again, law enforcement, same basic, nothing's changed on that, 26 positions. You have a district commander, and runs through the organizational chart. I won't get into that. That's the same. There's no recommendations for that organization structure to change. Again, there's another increase largely due to personnel cost, and that's largely due to the personnel safety, public safety personnel retirement system increased cost that's being hit to all the cities and towns and counties that are in the law enforcement responsibilities to meet the liability concerns, to meet their liability concerns of PSPRS. Remember, they have unfunded mandates that are in there that was hit because of the Great Recession, and a lot of those numbers are being hit to refund that, and all of us are having to pay that. We're not immune to it because we don't have our own police department. We actually, on the contract, it's passed through for personnel on those numbers. So that's largely some of the large part of the costs that we have that's part of that 10%. Again, 3.8 beats plus a school resource officer remains the same. Again, as I mentioned, county benefits are passed on to the town. Includes contract with county for animal control and jail fees, as well as a $15,000 reimbursement to the posse for vehicle maintenance on a reimbursement basis for their vehicles. They help, obviously they offset a lot of costs for us in special events, and they also help with transport of to the jail and things that they do with those vehicles. And honestly, those vehicles are a lot of hand-me-downs, and do require some maintenance. And we can, I think 3 years ago, we committed to help to a $15,000 reimbursement basis to help them with that maximum. Again, by section and program name, administration, animal control, incarceration, transport, patrol. As you can see the numbers. That's approximately the same as last year. Again, we had about a 10% increase last year too in those pass-throughs. And again, I'm not complaining. That's still efficient compared to, just to give you an example, City of Mesa has $8.7 million liability in their PSPRS for their law enforcement that they're having to come up with.
Councilwoman Hanson.
Ken, I know when we've had some of the law enforcement discussions in previous months, one of the things that came up were their work schedules and how they were working longer schedules as an incentive because they weren't able to get raises. Are they still on that same type of schedule?
Yes, they are, and they reserve the right on that, and per the agreement, that's their call. We can discuss it with them, but again, it's their decisions for that how they structure that.
Okay.
Court, again, same, last year. Got a presiding judge, which is actually part-time, got a full-time court administrator and a court clerk and a senior court clerk that handles the adjudication processes. It's an increase of about $1,900. They asked for a part-time staff position. Unfortunately, like many of the other requests, was unable to be filled for a part-time position. Continued with the teen court program, very successful program. I think we had the last one last week for this fiscal year. As you can see, it's about 0.7% increase from the previous year. And the program areas had admin, civil case, criminal case, juvenile. Admin is one of the core services. Again, that's town manager, legal services, town clerk, finance, risk management, IT, economic development, volunteer. You can see the numbers that make that up in there. It's about 8% on that side. And finance director, you might want to help me with that 8%. Just kind of elaborate on it, on what those costs were shifted over to.
Mayor and council members, the 8% is primarily due to the implementation of the environmental fee. We're expecting about $80,000 to have to make that operational.
Mayor,
Councilman Magazine.
is that a one-time or an annual fee?
Right now, we don't know. We're going out for an RFP to solicit vendors, and I don't have any cost ideas on what it would be on a recurring basis.
I mean, you would think that startup costs should be higher than just the annual continuation of the program.
I would hope so.
Craig, does that include the software that we needed or not? Is that just the cost of implementing the program?
It's the cost of implementing. We were not planning on purchasing any software.
We don't need to change and do, I thought we were going to have to go to some sort of a
Initially,
software program?
yes, Mayor. We were initially looking at an in-house. We feel that maybe doing a contractual would be much, much cheaper on an annual basis rather than doing that in-house and having to maintain that software program and doing it ourselves, because that's also going to require personnel.
Okay,
Mayor,
thank
just-
you. Councilman Magazine?
Just one other thing, just for the benefit of the public, this is going to, assuming 80,000 even annually, this should raise approximately how much annually?
I think we projected about 500,000.
Thank you.
Okay. As you can see, the food bank is part of that professional services contract, $24,200, same as last year. League of Cities dues, MAG dues, legal services, and finance for, as we just discussed, with the $80,000 for environmental fee. And 47.9, I think what that number is is being adjusted and revised again for that TPT. I think it's a little higher than that, isn't it? It's about 48 something now, from their initial numbers.
Councilman Magazine.
Mayor, Council, I'd like to speak for a minute to the food bank issue. I had the pleasure of meeting with the head of the food bank to discuss a number of issues and rumors. Rumors such as that most of the folks who were taking advantage of the food bank, or at least a substantial portion, were from outside Fountain Hills. And he supplied me with a quarterly report, and I can report based on that just is not correct. We have many, many, many Fountain Hill residents taking advantage of the food bank. One other item is that until present, none of the members of the board of the food bank have lived in Fountain Hills. And he indicated that one of them was moving to Fountain Hills. I'd like to suggest that I am in favor of this amount for the food bank, but I'd like to suggest that we convey to them that we would expect that they would increase their board by at least two additional residents of Fountain Hills on a timely basis. I think it's important that if we're going to continue to fund them, support them, and so on, that we be well represented on the board by people who live in the town. I guess I don't know quite how to move that along, except by motion or to ask Ken to convey it.
Well, I
or-
guess we could discuss that with Dave. I'm sure he would be amenable to that. It's very easy to work with.
It's been discussed, and I just hope he'll follow through.
Well, yeah, and I know he's done a lot to raise money on his own. They do a great job with their Friday fish fry. They do a fabulous job with that. They go to all the fairs, and all of the people that work there are volunteers. And of course, Max's Community Closet, they just opened, which is also run by a volunteer, and all other volunteers. So everything there is on a voluntary basis, so all the money that does go to them goes directly to the people. Thank you for that. Ken will make a note of that.
I'll make a note of that.
Suggestion to Dave, or I could just talk to him. Either way, at the next fish fry, I can bring
There
it
you
up.
go. As you can see, here's the organizational chart. Volunteer for the town manager, finance, town clerk, HR, administration services, and economic development. And within the finance, you have those other areas, financial services, accounting, administrator, and you have some part-time people that make that up as well, just to kind of give you a graphics of how the department is organized. And by program or division names, you can see that, and the changes between this past budget and what we're proposing for July 1, and those changes that we have there.
I just have one question about the personnel. I know that our IT administrator used to have another staff member that used to assist, but doesn't look like that anymore.
Staff member?
Yeah, there was someone else who.
It was a volunteer.
No, there was another staff member who used to double as IT also.
B.
Is that B? Yeah.
Double
So-
duty, too, couple hats.
Oh, right. So is B still wearing two hats, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, about 3 more, too.
I'm going to say two, you cut down.
Yeah.
Appropriately.
Thank you.
And she fills in admirably, too, when Mike's not available.
I know.
All right, economic development. As you know, there's the strategy, and there's all of our objectives, our goals, on the areas that are priorities that we've gone with the adoption of the economic development plan and its approach. And nothing's changed on it. We're still pursuing each one of those areas aggressively with our economic development coordinator, Scott Cooper. doing a really good job in trying to address each and every one of those areas. As you can see, it's made up by 3 different strategies. It's the downtown strategy, the business attraction strategy, and the tourism strategy. And as if you remember, last year, we had a 60-40 split between the 40% downtown strategy and the 60% went to business attraction and tourism. We changed that this past number of months when we brought the economic development coordinator on as full-time from part-time, as well as the tourism coordinator from part-time to full-time. And then we changed that to an 80-20 split. We also had a $90,000 contribution from the general fund that helped with the business attraction side. Because of the 80-20%, 80-20 split, and the availability of actually the general fund monies that we had for this, it actually equals out to approximately the same that we had as this past year's budget, but we were only able to give $50,000. So a combination of the $50,000 and that 80% split of that economic development funds help make up the business attraction and tourism strategy. There's also some other costs, some other fixed costs in there. Again, up in downtown strategy, we have Christmas lighting and some lighting repairs, and then we have some administration costs, as well as some transfers in there of the actual economic development fund, as we talked about, for a couple of projects, lighting projects that are there that would be considered by the council in future for that, should they want to do that. Also, down in the business attraction, there are some fixed costs that we have with the community theater. We have money that's over in the community services that fund that. We also have money in the economic development that also helps fund that that service as well. We have Jumpstart Biz, as well as some continued marketing. And as you know, part of the July 4th program is part of that funding as well. And then we have the GPEC dues. The tourism strategy is $139,100, but I believe that $20,000 of that is a grant that we're going for through tourism. I think it's a tourism grant that we're looking for that. So if we don't get that part of it, it'll be about 119 is what the budget will be. Last year was 103 for tourism.
Councilman Yates?
Ken or Rachel, in the event we don't get the grant, are we falling short on one of our strategies? Or is this a strategy that we'll use if we get the grant?
I'll ask the recreation supervisor to help answer that question.
Thanks, Rachel.
The short answer is, if we get the funds, we do have a plan for them. Most of the grants do have a focus. Specifically, one would be attracting more of a demographic to enjoy our golf courses out here and have a specific tie to that. So should we get the grant, that's where our emphasis will be. If we do not, we'll continue with the plan as we have it now. Does that answer your question?
To be specific, though, it won't impact what you already have. It's
No, we'll maintain what we
Specific.
already have, but it will allow us to hopefully do a little more should we
Awesome.
get it.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you.
Councilman Magazine?
Ken, I believe Paul Mood indicated to me that he was going to bid to extend the electricity for tree lighting from Town Hall to Saguaro. Where would that money come from?
Right there, that transfer from the Economic Development Fund, or the Downtown Strategy Fund, I'm sorry, for that number, but that's yet to be determined by the council on whether they're proceeding with those projects. Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Ken, I would like to open a discussion about the Economic Development Fund, this 80%. I had some reservations about the amount of money that was coming out of this fund. And so I sat down with our economic development specialist and with Craig, and we did some numbers, because I wanted to know, bottom line, after everything comes out of his budget, what's actually left for him to do marketing. And I was very surprised that he's going to be left with $17,000 to market this town for the next year. And I asked Scott what he could do with that, and he said maybe a little local, but not much. he can't do any type of regional marketing. And I'm very concerned because right now, economic development is our best tool that we have. And he's doing a great job bringing businesses into town, as we could see. But with $17,000, it's going to be hard for anybody to even know that we're here. So I'm looking at the $35,000. I'm wondering if we could consider reducing that, since the total amount that goes to the theater is $63,000. If we could reduce that a little bit and give Scott some more money to work with as far as economic development goes.
That's my proposal, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to open that up for discussion, because I wonder if everyone feels that $17,000 is adequate for economic development. I certainly don't. And it seems like every time we need some money, we pull it out of that fund, and that fund is supposed to be just for economic development. So I'd just like to see that amount reduced. Councilman Magazine?
I must say that I share that concern. Council has established economic development as one of its top 2 priorities, the other being maintenance of the roads and so on. And we've been, as a council, pushing economic development for some time now. As members of SPAC, Councilman DePorter and I were intimately involved in helping to put together the strategic plan for, the implementation plan, I should say, for economic development. And not only should we be marketing in the valley, I think we should be marketing outside the valley, throughout the state, and maybe in other parts of the country. I think there's real opportunity. I was talking to somebody about that today who said that, what about Canada? We have so many people, so many visitors who come here from Canada. We see them all the time. A lot of them are thinking about retiring here, moving here, possibly moving small businesses here. And our priority is to try to increase the population of the town so that we have more sales tax revenue, but also to increase the number of small businesses who might have executives who make good incomes, who have children to put in the schools, and so on. And I just don't understand how we could establish it as such a high priority and give it, in my view, such short shrift in terms of really doing something.
Any other discussion? Councilman DePorter?
I guess I was a little, this is my first budget cycle, as many of you know. I was a little surprised that, and I understand when you're budgeting, because I do this, we all do this for our house and we do this at our work, that you oftentimes have to paint things with a broad paint stroke and say 5% across all departments. And that's giving that each unit has the same value, right? So some are more core services and you have to do more things in certain areas. I guess I was a little surprised that our community partners didn't feel the same brunt of that, to be quite honest. I know it'd be small dollars, in the whole scheme of things, but I do think as partners in the community that it's, it's the onus is on us to be giving back and sort of bear the brunt of that weight. And that means realizing some uncomfortable times. You saw on the slide earlier the requested additional personnel. Well, I mean, think about what that's doing to our already very efficient staff at that 61 cents per resident that we're spending. In a way, that slide is something to be proud of, but in a way, it's something to be sad about, right? In some way about what we're spending on our community. But there's things that, our Director of Development Services, like Paul, they can't do because they just don't have the resources to do. We have things that could be public safety issues that fortunately we're doing, the Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulders. Those are things that we just were in the budget for a long time. We just couldn't do it because they didn't have the resources to do it. I want us all to pull that weight, and I think that should be a conversation that we have with those partners as well. I don't know what that even adds up to, and I don't even know if it adds up to the 15 or 16 grand we need to scrape together, but I think that as partners and as neighbors and residences that we all should bear that weight.
Over here.
Anything else? Councilman Hanson, and then Councilman Magazine.
We seem to have this discussion annually, so I think it's important to just say that we can't lump all of these different things, paint them with the same brush. We have to look at each one and see how are they benefiting the community. I look down the list and I see Jumpstart Biz. Okay, it's $4,500. How many businesses have really been created from this expenditure? I mean, that should be something that should be easy to measure. And of course, I have to do this because I do it every year, but bring up the GPEC fees, the dues. And that's over $11,000. And I know we hear every year how valuable that is, and it gives us all these tools to work with. But can we point to specific businesses that have resulted from that? So, and if we're going to talk about the theater, I think that is one entity that we can measure when it shows how many people from the outside that it attracts and brings to the community. So if we're having this discussion on what the value is of each one of these items, they have to be looked at on an individual basis to see what they're really bringing to the community.
Councilman Maxey?
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to, I have a prepared statement. And the reason I did this is because this has been such a contentious issue in the past. First, I want to say that with regard to the theater, I think some of us tend to discuss it in an all or nothing situation. If you cut back some of the money, it won't exist, therefore we won't have those people coming into town. And I just don't believe that's the correct interpretation. Because funding of the theater has been so controversial before I joined the council, I've given this year's funding level considerable thought. Let me say at the outset that my position has absolutely nothing to do with what has happened in the past or with personalities and positions that have preceded me on council. I'd like to think that I'm capable of carefully reviewing the facts and coming to a considered opinion. If not, I shouldn't be sitting here. And some of what I'm going to say is basically repeating some of what Ken did in the slides, but I think it's important to put it in a context. We can bury our heads in the sand, or we can look at our financial situation squarely. Let me say that I admire how previous councils and our town manager have handled our finances. They've done an incredible job under very difficult circumstances. I take no credit for it. I wasn't sitting here, but I think the council, the past council, the town manager have done an outstanding job. Here's what I see. The council has established as our operational priorities the ones we absolutely must fund above all else. And I won't go through all of them. Ken had them up on the slide. Economic development implementation was number 1 on that slide. Pavement management, fire station number 2, relocation, and so on. Now let's consider some facts. Public safety costs between FY01 through the present have increased 54.2%, while the general fund has increased only 25.7%. This year alone, fire and police costing us nearly $400,000 more than last year. Public safety is 52% of our budget. I don't want to leave the impression that the service we're getting is not worth the cost. It definitely is. Our firemen and police do a superb job, but we must recognize that continued costs are part of our future, as was shown on the slide that I questioned Ken about, with the fixed costs throughout the next several years. Road maintenance, 2009 Stantec report indicated that we should be spending $3 million plus on road maintenance and replacement. Council last year decided to put aside $1 million. We simply don't have the funds to keep pace with these core services, which was also indicated in the slides that Ken went over. Zone 1, as an example, is already falling behind because of costs. It was reported, I think, at the last council meeting that inspection shows that parts of Zone 1 not only need maintenance, they need replacement. We don't have the money for it. State shared revenues are 35% of the budget. Ken mentioned that our share might go down over time. Well, it's 35% of the budget, and we've read in the local press that Mesa, Chandler, and maybe other communities are going to be paying for mid-decade census. In one case, I think it's that Chandler would be paying about $3 million to do a census, but they'll be taking in about $5 million per year as a result of it because their population has exploded. Ours has stayed absolutely static. Therefore, given the way the state shared revenues are apportioned, our share is going to go down. There is no question about it, and it could go down a lot. So 35% of the budget could be diminished as a result of this. The state is passing on to us, in order to pay the State Department of Revenue to implement the new TPT law. We don't know how much, but it's more money. Water rates are predicted to double because of system improvements. And there are always unanticipated costs. I could go on, but I'll spare you more details. There are a lot more details and a lot more things that we should be concerned about. If this were a household budget, we wouldn't be planning a costly vacation or a new car. The time has come to re-examine promises made in the past. We can no longer afford some of what we have supported in past years, and optics count. When our citizens see that we're beginning to fall behind on financing core services, and we're faced with skyrocketing costs and increasing budget deficits, spending money on nice-to-have projects, amenities, and services creates a jaundiced view of our town government. Folks, we cannot grow our way out of this financial predicament. Everyone needs to be part of the solution, and that's why I can't, in good conscience, support the full amount recommended in the budget for the theater. I, for one, am not in favor of eliminating the budget for the theater. I think there is room to trim it some, perhaps put it to some of these other uses we're talking about. I don't do this lightly. I know the theater has tremendous support. I know a lot of people attend the theater. I think it's wonderful, and it's wonderful for the community, and I should have said that right up front. But we just simply can't do everything. Thank you.
Did you have a number in mind, or you just?
Yeah, in fact, I will make a motion. I'm good.
I thought we were
Oh, I'm sorry, right.
We'll be doing the motions after,
That's
but if
fine.
you want to just give us a number for
I was going to set it
discussion.
at $50,000.
The total,
Mhm.
from 63?
Mhm.
Okay. I just listening to what you just said and looking at the theater budget, they seem to have a very healthy revenue stream. Their revenue is, I believe on the sheet they gave us, was $507,000 in revenue. They do seem to be a little bit on the heavy side when it comes to salaries, $215,000. So perhaps to make up that small amount that you're talking about, if they could just do what we did and maybe cut back a little on personnel who have to be paid and look more towards volunteers, it might be easier to make that up. And of course, the town is always willing to help with in-kind donations to any of the groups, if that would help. Any other discussion on this side?
Yeah, Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger?
I certainly agree with what I've heard here in terms of community partners perhaps contributing 5% more, 10% more. But Councilman Magazine, to your conversation that we just heard, we certainly need to make these cuts and we need to be frugal. But cutting the theater by $5,000 or cutting some of these budgets by $5,000 is certainly not going to address the issue that you're talking about. And I've heard this several times from you, and I'm wondering what your solution is, because we're now being penny wise and dollar foolish. Let's just put it on the table. We all know that sitting here and managing budgets year in and year out has been difficult. Most years, there's a little moisture left in the sponge. This year, there's no moisture left in the sponge. There's not much we can squeeze out of it. So we're up here playing musical chairs. Now, I'm all in for cutting the 5% or going back and equalizing it at $50,000. But let's look at the value that some of our partners bring to the table. Why don't we start working with our partners rather than working against our partners? I just heard a diatribe on economic development. If anyone up here thinks economic development is a silver bullet, given the capacity we have in this town, we're fooling ourselves. What we have done is we have brought an economic development person on board full-time. We've brought a tourism person on board full-time. Comparing last year's economic budget to this year's economic development budget is increased by 28%. We've increased tourism by 10%. Tourism and economic development go hand in hand. we're saying that we need extra money for marketing in terms of economic development. I don't argue that, but the bottom line is that we are growing these particular work units. They've gone from part-time to full-time, and I need to see a little ROI before I start investing more money in either of those departments. Now, what's interesting is when SPAC proposed economic development, it was an unfunded mandate. And what council did is developed a strategy for funding both of these programs. And I'm happy to see in our budget this year that they have their own cost centers. And those cost centers are kind of incentive-based when you think about it, because both of those cost centers are funded through sales tax revenue. So once again, I can see where this is going, and if we want to cut back here and there 5%, that's all fine and good. But let's look at what we need to do in 16, 17 when we have real issues. We need to have a discussion about revenue solutions. The time is now. But let's not beat up our partners. As a matter of fact, one last comment, Mayor, if I may. When you look at economic development and you look at marketing, oftentimes it's a shot in the dark. You don't know what you're going to get for your marketing dollars. Social media hits here and hits there, fine and good. I don't see anything materializing from that. But what we know about our theater is that our theater does attract tourists. Our theater does add value to economic development in our town. It adds value to retaining businesses if more people are coming to our shows and using our theaters. So once again, yeah, we want to pull back 5%, 10%. I'm okay with that, but there's a bigger discussion here, and let's stop trying to balance our budget on the backs of our community partners. There's a much bigger issue we need to address. Thank you.
Councilman Magazine, before you comment, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
If we reduce that to the 50, which would actually bring it in line with our other partner, and then that's 13,000 added to, would you add that then to the 17,000 and give that money to Scott Cooper to work his economic development office?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. And now you may go ahead with your comment.
Well, I'm really sorry that Councilman Leger characterized my comments on economic development as a diatribe. As I recall, council unanimously voted in favor of the implementation plan for economic development, and I was sitting here when everybody was extolling the virtues of economic development and how we needed to generate more small businesses and population and so on. I never, ever used the term silver bullet. I've never described it as a silver bullet. I've described it as pretty much an arrow in our quiver. It's one of many things we need to do to improve this town and grow this town. It's a little unsettling to hear these words thrown back at me when in fact council basically said the same things I just did when they approved the plan. Secondly, it's not $5,000, it's $14,000. At least that's what I mentioned. And lastly, I keep talking about optics. I think it's critically important if, as I know Councilman Leger would like to increase the income of the town, as would all of us. But when SPAC had a joint meeting with council, at which I sat as member of SPAC about 2 years ago, twice I raised the issue of optics. How do we tell the people, how do we tell the public that we have financial problems, that we have deficits as far as the eye can see, that we're going to have a $700,000 deficit in 2 years, and that doesn't include losing state shared revenues and any other costs? How do we tell them that and at the same time fund some of the things we fund? I'm not singling out the theater. I think there are other things we need to look at. We need to reduce our spending. If we don't reduce our spending, we're asking for very serious trouble.
Any other comments? Vice Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. That's quite a bit of doom and gloom going on in here tonight, and I would like to say that we all need to remember that this town has pretty well been financed and built on the backs of the general contractors and the developers of this town. And we had a depression, call it a recession if you may. It clearly was a depression in this town, and construction almost shut completely off. And through the blessings of God, I survived that. And what I am seeing happening in the town of Fountain Hills is not only amazing, it's very encouraging. And we have managed this budget now for about 8 years without any more income coming in, and our town has survived. And this town is going to go ahead and survive, regardless as to whether we have a theater or movies in the park or all these other amenities. That's all going to happen. But what I'm trying to say is that this town is getting ready to experience a yet another growth streak, and I'm extremely optimistic toward this. I've been in the industry, I've followed it very closely. I'm watching the number of permits that are coming to town. I'm looking at the new developments, and I've jotted down a couple just to kind of show where we're headed. We're talking about doing a downtown project. It's in review right now, that somewhere around $180 million if we can bring it all together, and that'll happen in the next 3 years at the most. We're looking at putting on a new assisted living center out on Saguaro and Trevino that is one of the most well-thought-out, beautiful projects that we've seen in the longest of times. We're looking at Adero Canyon, thanks to MCO and the patience of MCO. Adero Canyon's coming online, and it's going to be one of the hottest projects, I think, in Arizona. Silverleaf is going to be built out, and there isn't any more property like it except when you come into Fountain Hills and look at Adero Canyon, Sunridge Canyon, the few lots we have left in Fire Rock. We've got Parcel B, which is being developed by Toll Brothers. Parcel B is a 58-lot subdivision that we approved about 4 months ago. They are progressing very nicely on their plans, and they will be out of the ground clearly in probably the second quarter of 2016. And these are all projects that are going to be bringing money into this town for the first time in 8 years. So we need to be looking forward and saying we are going to make it through this last tough, hard uphill battle. We're going to make it through this, and then we're going to be smarter about the way we finance our town, because when construction's over with, it's going to be just like it has been for the last 8 years, guys. And we need to be planning for that. But right now, we need to be looking forward to coming out of this depression and moving forward with this town and making this town a happy place to be, a good place to be. And it is. It's incredibly wonderful. And to the point of the theater, which that had nothing to do with my comment on the theater. I'm just tired of hearing about how this town's not going to make it, it's struggling. Yeah, damn right we're struggling, dramatically. But we're going to come through it. Once again, on the backs of some developers and contractors, this town's going to make it, and we're all part of it. So let's kind of pull together on it. Now, as far as the theater, just as the comment was made about attracting young kids and attracting people from out of town for 3 or 4 nights out of the week for the movies in the park and the musical festival, it's almost every weekend the parking lot is full in front of the theater. Every weekend, not 3 nights out of the week. Now, I know, to Cecil's point, yeah, they're getting a pretty good break on their building. They're getting a tremendous break. And I know that we're giving them a little more than everybody else. And I can concede a portion of that to go into economic development, but I don't think we need to just arbitrarily take 30% of it. And I won't support that. But I can foresee taking some of the proceeds that we are now focusing on the theater and putting it into economic development, because that in turn will bring more people to town to go to the theater. And that's how I see it.
Any other comments? Yes.
It's hard to follow that, and I want to apologize that I
Well, you're-
waited. But good job, Councilman Brown. I hate echoing everybody. Everyone has valid points, but collectively, this group of expenses are less than 0.2 of 1% in the scheme of things. The 5% cut makes sense. Economic development, no, it's not a silver bullet, as we always say, but as we all know, the leakage alone, meaning the amount of retail sales that are going over the mountain, far exceeds $3 million. So I think that is worth investing in. $15,000 for economic development, that isn't even a drop in the bucket of what it should be. As everyone knows here, and Ken, you more than most, what the budget of most economic development groups and other municipalities exceeds hundreds of thousands of dollars. So an extra $2,000 or $3,000 to Scott, I know he can stretch it, but that isn't fixing the issue. 5% cut I'm with, but yes, economic development needs to be invested in, as we say every year. It's not a silver bullet, it's part of the pie. We still need to address revenue, but it's something that we need to consider a little bit higher priority than I think what some of us are saying is necessary. Thank you, Mayor.
Just a comment in relation to our partners. I know that the Boys and Girls Club did ask for 60-something thousand, and we said no, and we gave them 51. So we did ask them to take a reduction there in what they asked for. So I don't see any reason why we can't have this small reduction, as Councilman Magazine said, and put that back into our ED fund. It may be a small amount, but Scott can certainly make it worth every penny with how well he can handle his funding and how efficiently he's been handling his office. And I also want to comment that one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of Movie in the Park and the Music Festival is because they're free. They're the only free events that we have, that we offer to the people, both young and old, except for the ballet. And of course, everybody knows we have to pay $10,000 to have the ballet come. But those two are free. The ballet is free. It's something that all of our residents can enjoy. That's probably why we have 1,000 people in the park, because it is a free event. And I'd like to continue to give them something free. If you do go to the theater, you do have to buy a ticket, so it does cost. There are families that can't afford to go, and they have to, as Councilman Magazine pointed out, there are quite a few people who use our food bank, so I don't think those people have money as liquid as other people have. So I just wanted to point out those two differences, and then if no one has any other comment, I'm going to ask Ken to go on and just to make note of Councilman Magazine's proposal, and Councilwoman Hanson has another comment.
Just kind of one final comment. Again, we can't compare all the partners with one brush. The theater does stand out as the one group that does attract the most people to our town. Every time they market the theater, they are marketing Fountain Hills. And they're one area that has a proven record of bringing dollars to this town. Our other partners have different purposes. One is helping the hungry. The Boys and Girls Club provides programs for the kids. And yeah, the concerts in the park and the movie in the park are free, but that's a different thing. It brings people to the town once, twice a year, and that's great. But the theater is an ongoing, month after month, benefit to the town with the people that it does bring to our restaurants, our retail stores, our gas stations, and that's enough.
Councilman Magazine.
Yeah, I'm sorry to prolong this, but I've got to seek clarification. Do any members of council really believe that reducing funding by the amount that I mentioned is going to result in the theater closing its doors and people not coming to Fountain Hills and using our restaurants, our gas stations, and everything? I, for one, don't believe it for a minute. I don't think anything is going to change. The theater is terrific. It has a great reputation. They will tighten their belts. They'll find a way to raise more money, just like every other organization is going through this. I just don't see how the argument holds water that they do so much for the town and therefore we should be very careful about how we deal with them. They will continue, and they will flourish.
All right. Ken, can we go on to our next slide?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, again, Development Services is another core service that we have. As you can see with the organization, you know, with the director, it has a street superintendent and a facilities environmental supervisor. And within that, you have various areas, as I mentioned earlier, everything from the street operations, which, you know, signal tech, to fleet mechanics, to open space specialists, to street maintenance techs, to the GIS tech and the chief building official and the town engineer and the senior planner and the engineering inspector and the code enforcement officer and permit tech. You also have some custodial contracts that we have to make up the gaps that we have with trying to maintain our facilities. Some of them are 24-hour operations, like this building right here, with the law enforcement that's in it, as well as community center, library, and the museum that need additional maintenance on that side of it. As you can see, it's down from previous year, but that's to the transfer of the cost of the new to the proposed new environmental fund. So, but again, as I mentioned, it's all those various areas and its responsibilities that we have 6 dams. They're dams. They're actually certified dams that we're responsible for. Solid waste recycling contract administration, 700 acres of wash maintenance that we've absorbed over the years since we've been in existence, maintenance of 10 town-owned buildings, and administration of 11 capital projects right now, and 2,200 building inspections a year, as well as 775 code enforcement cases, just to kind of give you a little bit of the breadth that Development Services does. As you can see by program, engineering, facilities, planning, building safety, code enforcement, mapping, from previous year to this year, you'll see those numbers from a program stand.
If I may.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Ken, I don't know just exactly what this will look like, but I pretty well explained myself as far as what I see Fountain Hills could possibly do in the year starting early 2016 with the number of projects coming online. Is there any way we could, and I know we have to put it in the budget or we won't be able to utilize it, is there any way we can take a portion of the permit fee that's being paid and set aside to help staff, such as the permit tech, the building official, the engineering and planning department that are going to be having to handle this workload?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Brown, I guess the basic answer is no, because that is a general revenue source that is in the general fund. And what you're going to do is rob Peter to pay Paul, because you're going to take those permit fees, you're going to set it aside for a specific area, and you're going to take it from the general revenue that's funded all of that.
Well, and that's all good and fine, that's fine and good, but if this takes off like it's kind of aligning itself to, we don't have enough money in this budget to even take care of our own inspections and our own
I don't know what to tell you.
Well,
$350,000 is what the amount of the services that we're wanting, and I think the number, please help me out on this, Finance, that on just Development Services, on the planning, on those two positions, what those numbers were.
They were a total of $152,000 roughly?
$152,000 right there, you'd have to find some place that you'd have to reduce. And with that amount of money, that's a significant change in any of the other programs that we have out of the general fund.
Okay, and I'm saying, is there no way, thinking outside the box a little bit, that the builders and developers are paying for a service that we're not getting? I mean, now we're doing great right now. The staff is hanging in there and they're doing a good job. But if in fact we started carrying a triple amount of permits that are being issued, what are we going to do?
Well, I don't know if we're going to do a triple amount. I mean, that's the thing that we looked at hard. I don't have an answer for you.
Nor do I.
There's no money, unless you want to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's the only thing I can tell you. Believe me, that was one of my highest priorities, was to try to figure out how we could get them some staff members. But with that kind of number that's sitting out there for those costs, I don't know how to do that. I just don't know how to do that.
Well, I certainly don't either, but it could get to be a real problem for the town of Fountain Hills.
One of many.
One of many.
Part of the development services is also obviously the street operation. There's 4.5 full-time equivalents that are in there that takes care of 390 lane miles of road, 3.5 million square yards of asphalt. Now granted, we do have some contracts in there that help us with sweeping and 68 acres of maintenance on the medians. That's what we have. But we're focused in on the operations that we have on the ongoing, but we also have $1 million that we're putting toward pavement maintenance in Zone 1 this year that we'll be doing this summer to start that process. As you can see in the HERF by different programs, those are the numbers that we have that we're budgeted for each one of the areas: admin, adopt, street, legal services, open space, pavement management, street signs, street sweeping, traffic signals, and vehicle maintenance. We're responsible for the safety. The most important part of the whole thing that we're doing there, and the most important responsibility, is the safety of our transportation system. So we're trying to make sure that it stays safe, and then maintaining it because it is the biggest asset that we have responsibility for in the town of Fountain Hills. Replacement's well over $150 million on these roads. And that was a 2009 study that said that. So I'm sure it's worth more now, today. Now we're addressing that, and thank goodness for the voters of Fountain Hills that gave us a bond to help one of our oldest roads in town to become a new one, and a focus there, and some participation with Maricopa Association of Governments to give us money for Shea Boulevard project, 75% of it. We had to come up with 25% of that side of it. But the rest of these areas that we have to maintain. And we're doing, I think, we're holding it together. Just how many, Paul, how many signals do we have? 13 signals and one person that takes care of that. And thank goodness for an in-government agreement with Scottsdale that backs us up with their operations that'll come over and help us to help maintain those as well.
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Yates?
Everyone, this may be a good time to bring this up to Councilman Magazine's question about how do we portray that information, because every year we balance the budget, so we all walk out, whew, we did it. We balance the budget, but the reality is this deferred maintenance and replacement reserve and the operational shortages we're not sharing with you. Not that I'm for giving staff additional work, but I'm almost thinking we need another line item to show, yeah, the budget's balanced, but what it's really needed, the shortage. The number you just made, and I remember it was like 150 million. Let's pretend that all of our capital improvement projects were fully funded and the streets were in good shape. What kind of a shortage are we on an annualized basis right now just on maintenance to maintain what we have? Isn't it? It's between $3 and $5 million, but 3.5. But if there's a more concrete number that we could.
Based on the 2009 study, we're working on 2009 numbers. And I know that we were looking at even trying to put a study in this year's budget and couldn't afford it to update that. We wanted to know exactly what it is, because we do have some roads, there's a number of roads that are hitting the 40-year mark.
40 years, yeah.
Okay? The continuum, the asphalt continuum on that. Paul can explain it better to you, and he knows it better because he sees it on a daily basis, he and his staff. But we could possibly lose ground. Remember, we have a maintenance. We tried to keep it on a 7-year rotation. That's what you try to do, 5 to 7 years. That's going to be difficult when you're out there having to replace areas that are failing, and it's beyond maintenance. And that's what we're experiencing in these older areas of town at this point in time, and it might even have to lengthen out. So there is a concern that Councilmember Magazine brought up, that, yeah, with an age study, although I still think it's effective, okay? Because we are looking at creating another fund for asphalt replacement, that by 2020, we can hopefully have another $1 million that will do nothing but is responsible for maintenance of, not maintenance, but the replacement of asphalt, to include that other $1 million for maintenance. And hopefully we can add. Is it going to still be behind? I don't know that. We need another Stantec report. That's going to need to be, to tell us that
Madam
in the
Mayor.
future.
But if you were to throw a number at what our shortfalls are,
I don't have the expertise to tell you that. When you go across the board,
yeah,
facilities,
yes.
roads, you name it, I don't have the expertise to tell you. Customarily, cities go and get a cost of service report. You bring a consultant that are trained and experienced with doing those. That tells you how much it costs to operate those things and what going forward was going to cost to do. Now, those are very expensive to do, unfortunately, but that will be that's the information that you really need. We don't have the staff expertise to tell you that. We can give you a WAG or even a swag, you know.
Wild ass.
I'd like a WAG. Move for WAG.
Oh, you really want one? Okay.
That was literal?
Well, you've heard it. I mean,
I know what it
Stantec, it was pretty much on. It said $3 million a year just for the ongoing maintenance programs to stay on top of what you got. And then it also said, you know, you better start replacing asphalt out there. So in order to do that, we put together a bond issue that was unsuccessful to address those and going forward, okay? So we had to regroup, and we incrementalized that going forward so that we took each specific project. You're going to need another bond issue in the 20s, 2022, somewhere in there, to start looking at those 40-year-old streets
Thank you, Mayor.
to address
Thanks,
that.
Good enough.
But you're going to have to look at,
the WAC.
you're still looking at the $3 million that you're going to really need. And right now, we've eked out every cent we could to tell you what we think we can get for pavement management program for a $2 million program in 2020, to start there.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Magazine.
I would add to that, and I don't know if it comes under the same heading, but as I mentioned earlier, there's also the unforeseen. If we need a new liner for the lake, we've got 40-year-old pumps out there. I would assume we're talking mega millions of dollars. Is that correct?
No, the WAG, yes.
Didn't we remove the pump design from, was that the pump design that was removed?
No, that was for a distribution system that would bring effluent over for Golden Eagle.
Oh, a different pump, okay.
And right now, it's on other property. We wanted to bring it on ours.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Leger.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the answer to Councilman Yates' question is a lot of money. And in 2006, we did a strategic plan, and we did projections and said what we would need in 14-15. We've managed our budget, so we're now looking at a deficit in 16-17. The point I made earlier, or the point I was trying to make earlier in responding to Councilman Magazine's comments, is that I know, we know, we've been wrestling with this year in and year out. I'm simply asking, what's the solution? I keep hearing what the issues are. I want to know what the solution is. That's what I want to know, and that's what I want to talk about. And my point was that, you know, you nickel and dime yourself, and there's this fantasy that economic development is the solution. I said it's not the silver bullet. I didn't say anyone else said it wasn't a silver bullet. Is economic development and tourism an important ingredient of a diverse revenue portfolio? Absolutely. Do I support economic development? Absolutely. Did we increase the budget from last year to this year by 28%? We have. Have we increased tourism by 10, 12%? Yes, we have. So I favor those programs. I'm just simply saying that we're at the point now where I think we're getting into more ideological discussions that are disguised in funding this and funding that. I don't need any more lectures. What I need to hear, if someone is going to talk about the dire state of our town, are solutions. That's what I need to hear, and that's all I was responding to. And your comments were thoughtful, and I appreciate them, and I respect them. But we're not going to get there by cutting $5,000 here, $5,000 there. It's just not going to happen. So I just wanted to clarify, I'm looking for solutions. We all know where we're at. And frankly, to Councilman, Vice Mayor Brown's response, we are an awesome town. We are in pretty good shape. Our issues are no different than any other municipality. Scottsdale, that seems to be rolling in money, has the same issues regarding facilities, has the same issues regarding roads. Welcome to the world of municipal governance. It's not perfect. Our streets will never be perfect. Ideally, we do the best we can with what we have, and that's what we're doing. But once again, we need a solution other than just economic development. Thank you.
Can we go on, please?
We could get rid of streetlights.
Stop signs.
Dark sky.
Stop signs are just,
Very dark. Very dark.
stop signs are just suggestions in this town anyway, but, from what I've seen.
Don't put that in the record.
Don't put that in the record.
The captain's not here.
Let's take away stop signs because we have too many violations.
Okay, community services, as you can see, many areas, responsibility, recreation, senior services, events and marketing, and parks. And we have a number of part-timers that help us fill in the gaps, as you can see by the lime green. The dark blue are the full-timers, and the lime green help us fill the gaps for a lot of our night events and weekend events that assist the full-time staff. Again, it's down about 3%, 3.7. It's 2.2 million for as I mentioned, all the programs that we program areas that we provide. As you said, the tourism, which is not in that budget, it's over in economic development, 116 acres of park, dog park, 5 ballparks, 700 acres of preserve, 10.43 miles of trails, recreation programs for adult, youth, and senior citizens, additional recreation professional services, the Boys and Girls Club. Although their request was $60,000, my recommendation is $51,200, which is the same as they have in this current budget that we have this year. And the other one is the youth arts and culture, which is a theater, which is the general fund portion of that is the $28,096. As you can see by the program division names, again, and the differences between this year's budget and what's being proposed for that, as I just talked about.
Councilman
Any
Hanson
questions?
has a question.
Real quick, on going back to page 81, did the Avenue medians get moved into, like, the acres of parks? Is that in that?
Very good. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. Yes, the Avenue of the Fountains medians were moved from street department operations over into the Parks Department this year. And that's part of their operations in there.
Okay.
So Parks will take it over July 1.
Okay, thank you.
We had to, well,
This isn't funny.
Mark and Don, we had to say,
Stop that laughing.
please, this is going to be your responsibility July 1.
It's a park, isn't it?
No, it's a plaza. Come on, you guys named
That
it.
wasn't the approved name.
It's a plaza. Okay, anyway, CIP. Last year was 22 million, this year is 14. A lot of the major projects of significance, obviously, is the northeast quadrant of town. As you can see, some of those, the dark red lines are going to be actual asphalt replacement, and little dots are the pavement failures that are beyond maintenance that have to be replaced. It could be as much as a 3-year project. We're going to mill and overlay Glenbrook, El Pueblo, and Grande. 712,000 square yards of asphalt are in Zone 1, which is the northeast quadrant. It's the largest we have. 73 pavement replacements right now to date, and about 19,000 square yards of what we're going to have to replace for the asphalt. Along with that, we've got the Ashbrook Wash Project that's with an intergovernmental agreement with McFlood to help us with that drainage project that's on actually Saguaro that you'll see down there right just north of Grandy, the intersection of Grandy and Saguaro. The miscellaneous drainage projects we have around in those washes. Remember, previous years, we had 30,000, we upped it to 50 out of the CIP to help because we're losing ground in some of those maintenance areas. The downtown vision plan for the Avenue Lakeside project, we have money that's always reserved for that, for downtown. And then the fire station number 2 relocation project is there should the council decide to do that project. The Fountain Park improvements, Phase 6, is underway as we speak now, as well as, and we're looking at a water quality, which is more aeration and mixing of the projects of the water that's in the lake. The Adero Canyon Trailhead, we're looking at money there that will start that project to complete currently we have 95% plans developed. We're looking at completing it 100% and to start the bidding process so that we can crank that up next summer in 2016. And obviously to finish up the Shea and Saguaro Street projects.
Councilman Magazine has a question.
Still got a few more if we want to talk.
Do you want to wait?
Let me finish those first.
All right.
And then Saguaro Boulevard to finish it up, which is scheduled for October to be completed. Palisades Saguaro Traffic Light, which I think we're going to start drilling the holes now for those bases out there at that intersection. Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulder paving, which is a little bit of a widening on both sides of that for pedestrian and or bicycle, because it's some very dangerous areas on some of those shoulders on Fountain Hills Boulevard. The Highway Safety Improvement Program and the McDowell Mountain Road repairs, as I mentioned earlier, that's out there north of town, and some contingency. So we have $14,276,350 that's proposed for those projects. I'd be happy to answer any questions on CIP.
Councilman Magazine?
Just a quick question. Paul had indicated to me, and, people who've been on the council, I'm sure know this, but apparently we went from, on the drainage projects, we went from a 4-year cycle to a 7-year cycle. Is that correct? And are we still on schedule with that, for the 7-year cycle?
No, 7 years pavement maintenance. I'm not sure what it is on a wash. I don't think there's a cycle for that.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Magazine, the asphalt cycle is on about a 10-year cycle. If you're talking about wash maintenance,
Yes.
we're on a 4-year cycle for wash maintenance.
Oh, we are on a 4-year cycle.
Yeah, there was a time, I believe, in 2009-10, when it got defunded. I believe it was before I was here, and that pushed us back to a 7-year cycle. And we're starting to take pictures, and we're going to document. We took some pictures of before and afters of what we just did. And we're going to take a picture every year. And I can almost guarantee after 1-2 years, it'll be full grown in there in the wash again.
Yeah, so we are back to a 4-year.
We're in a 4-year cycle.
And you anticipate we can keep to that, or is there any way to know?
Yeah, right. We can keep to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Paul, can I ask you a question for you? The miscellaneous drainage projects, is that the drainage ditches that run through town, kind of between the homes, or is that something else?
Mayor Kavanaugh, council members, no, the drainage parcel cleaning that we're doing, we brought a 5-year contract to council recently. That, we're doing those right now. That's a part of that environmental fee. These areas are, this $50,000 is a good example, is at La Montana and Segundo. There used to be a large, there's a wash there, and it used to be just wide open. We used some of that money to extend the culvert, bring some dirt in, and cover it up. So these are more permanent drainage type improvements, not maintenance of vegetation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, go on.
There's some fee schedule that we have some minor changes to. that, you know, obviously that there are some pass-through costs that's costing us more to do some of those fees that we needed to increase so that we're not subsidizing those, like copies of street index maps and things like that. We want to make sure that we recoup our costs for them. I'll be happy to discuss any one of these, or the directors will, but we have some areas that we just wanted to make sure that we highlighted so that because we're going to put those in the budget resolution that goes with it. So we wanted to do it in detail. And again, they were all in bold on any of the changes. Again, those are going to be pass-through costs that cost us, the increased cost that cost us, so we need to pass those through. Otherwise, we're going to subsidize, which we shouldn't be doing.
Okay, so the fee schedule on that page, some of them are less. Some of them went from $3 to the new fee is $1.40. Some went down?
Yes,
Okay. So some went down and then you added some?
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman Hanson.
Could you share a little bit more about the discussion on charging for the avenue? And on page 95 and 96, it covers, there's two different rates for the avenue, but it doesn't say why they're different. So the one on 96 says 3-hour minimum on the Avenue Plaza rental is $112.50 per hour for each section. But on 95, the same 3-hour minimum is $75 per hour each section.
I'll ask the Community Services Director to respond to that question.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Hanson, we have two sets of fees depending on whether you're a resident or non-resident. That's the difference in the fee. So the higher fee would be for non-resident commercial rate. The resident fee would be the lower rate.
Okay, and do we take into consideration at all what type of use is, I mean, and where I'm going is, of course, we always have the discussion, how can we attract more events and get, groups to sponsor events? And Farmers Market comes to mind because that was one of the first ones to start doing that. So are we taking away the incentives to have groups, host these types of events by charging, or are we comfortable with that? I didn't recall that we ever had the dialogue or the discussion on how and what we would charge for the medians.
That's why we proposed the new fee. The methodology that I used was this. We have two other facilities that we typically would rent out, one being the amphitheater, and the other one is the Centennial Circle. The fees that I proposed in there are exactly the same, so that somebody coming to town would have a choice of the different venues and would make that choice based on what they thought was the best venue rather than what was the cheapest price. So that was the methodology that I used. The council obviously is free to set that wherever they want to. I would also remind you, though, that we do have another avenue, and because of the recently revised sponsorship and naming rights policy, they do have options of either reducing or eliminating fees by going through that procedure as well. So that's something they have an avenue to look at as well.
Okay, I thought maybe that would be something we'd want to talk about down the line, and we don't want to deter anybody from,
Certainly.
Bringing people here, but it's new, so.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Councilman Magazine, is that for Mark or?
No.
Okay.
Out of all of these fees, I see only, it appears that 3 maybe have been changed, some up, some down. I assume there's sort of a different methodology for each one. I mean, how do we determine this? How often do we look at these and determine whether or not they're the right numbers?
Annually. We do them in budget annually.
Each one of them?
Yeah, you'll see it in budget every year. Fee schedules are always approved by council so that they're fixed annually by the budget.
No, I understand that.
And we review them for cost
That's what I meant. Okay.
to make sure that we're trying not to subsidize. Now, there's some of them that Councilmember Hanson brings up. We're trying to make sure that we keep them as cost-effective as we can, but there's also cost to us as an organization that we need to consider.
Okay.
Personnel. lastly. 52.32, full-time equivalent. As you can see, it's about 1.6% increase over last year total. We're asking for a 2.5% adjustment on the base salary plan, which will be effective July 1, for all employees that have the capacity in their range, as recommended in 15-16. Total cost about $63,822 to us. Personnel requests, again, we unfortunately weren't able to do any new staff positions. Again, 42 full-time, but we have 21 part-time, and the full-time equivalent of combination of those 52.32, as everything I just mentioned. With that, the adoption will be through two resolutions. One of them is the adoption of the proposed budget. The other one, it clarifies the parameters that how we administer that budget. There's a kind of a how-to administer it with parameters on what we're supposed to do during the year with it. And if there's something that goes outside of that, we have to bring it back to the council for further direction and approval for policy direction. It also assists the mayor and council and citizens with the clear understanding and parameters of the various department program expenditures for the final adopted budget. It also adopts organizational chart, full-time equivalent schedule, job descriptions, pay plan for the 15-16 fiscal year. Anytime those are approved for changes, we have to bring those back to the council. An asphalt replacement policy is added to the pavement management program as well. With that, my recommendation is $37,954,031. I believe it's now for, if you have any further questions of me, you have public comment opportunities, and then you might want to talk about at least the three different areas that I wrote down on considerations for this budget.
Okay, first I'll ask if the council has any further comments. Other than that, I'll go to the people who want to speak. Councilman Magazine?
Yeah, Ken, two items. You got $40,000 in the payment, in the budget for online payments, correct?
Yes, that's for the website. Isn't that for software? Online payment software.
Online payment.
That's to try, because right now we don't have online payments, make it for the convenience of people. They can go online to make those payments. We don't have that opportunity. We're trying to do it through our new website, and our software is to be able to do that, have an advantage.
So we haven't had it in the past. How was it handled in the past without online?
Come on in and pay it, not the counter.
Well, it
Mail it in.
worked for a lot of years.
Yes, it has. We're just trying to, our customer focus center.
Well,
Okay.
Given our situation.
Time's money,
Yeah.
as Vice Mayor Brown says, and if he can do that online at his desk and pay those fees, it's a lot easier than trudging down to town hall and come up second floor and pay it.
I agree, but I have to say that I think that's $40,000 that could be used in other ways.
It's up to the council. It's my
understand.
recommendation that you
I understand.
you have the program.
The other one is there's $60,000 in the budget for SPAC. I recall that when we, 5 years ago, did the comprehensive plan, I believe council approved $10,000 in expenditures, and it cost something like $3,500. Now, I know you have a lot of new members of SPAC, and I know you've talked about the possibility of getting consulting help, but that just seems like a lot of money to me, and I wonder whether or not the members of SPAC could work with the consultant, hand in glove, to produce a plan. So I'm going to recommend that it be reduced. I'm going to say to $40,000, which I think is still high, but also to hold it in reserve until we know what they're going to do with it. Because we met with SPAC, and it was very clear they didn't know how they were going to proceed. They had no idea. They were going to go back and talk about it and come back to council and address the methodology they'd use to do the plan. So I think we should reduce it, and I think we should put it in reserve until we know specifically how it's going to be used.
Okay, Ken, you added that to the list. Anyone else have a comment?
Mayor,
Councilman Leger?
Mayor, if I may, as a follow-up to Councilman Magazine's, can, I guess, reserve, basically, we would be appropriating the dollars. If and when SPAC comes back with a plan, would that come before council in terms of approving that expenditure?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be the safety net. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay with the council. We'll go to our public who has patiently waited. And Bev?
I think one is left. We
One is
have two cards who wanted to show support for the movie in the park. And then we have one, Justin Duran. He's still here.
Okay, Justin, come on up.
Good evening to the town council and to the mayor. This is obviously my first time addressing a town hall like this and being a part of this. I've been a part of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Scottsdale as an employee for the last 15 years, and I'm the new branch director here in town. I've been here since May. I'm very impressed with all of the town staff that I've been able to work with. They've been great to work with, and we really feel a part of the town. Wanted to address that Town Manager Buchanan and his staff have been really able to work with us and kind of walk me through this whole budgeting process. And I wanted to say that I understand, obviously, because we're currently going through the same budget process right now of needing to make some cuts, and we've had to make some difficult cuts as an organization as well. With that being said, wanted to further explain our reasoning for requesting the $60,000, which was an increase from this year of the $51,200. The Boys and Girls Club is wanting to make sure that we are being partners and good partners with the town, in that we're trying to make sure that the town of Fountain Hills, when they're trying to attract families here, that we provide a high-quality program, that we provide a high-quality facility, and we're able to provide the best program possible. I know that it was mentioned the obstacles that were had as far as being able to provide community-wide activities, community-wide programs. As I said earlier in my statement, that I've worked with the Boys and Girls Clubs now for 15 years, and in those 15 years, I've personally put on community-wide activities that have attracted 400, 500, 600 people to those activities from the Boys and Girls Club, and wanted to make further statement that we're willing to partner with you as far as the movie in the park and help supplement however we can, whether that's providing staffing, whether that's working with the recreation department and helping Rachel and her team put on the best event that we can. Understand completely where you're coming from and appreciate the fact that the town has provided funds for us to continue the program that we have. And I would just like to say that however we can help maintain the quality atmosphere for families and to encourage youth and families to come into town, we want to be a partner with that. We want to be the premier youth services for the town of Fountain Hills. And as Vice Mayor Brown said, we have a great town. We have a place that people want to come. We have a place that people want to visit. Well, we want to make sure that we're that premier name of being for youth everywhere, whether it's youth sports, whether it's an after-school program, a before-school program, or summer program. We've really maintained this upcoming year of working with the new superintendent that's coming in, working with the new potential town manager that will be coming in. We want to make sure that we're that premier youth services organization and help however we can. So appreciate you giving me this time to speak tonight, and really appreciate you guys with your funding that you've given to us this year. So thank you.
All right, thank you, and we do appreciate your offer to give back, and we will take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Please let us know however we can help.
Thank you. Next.
Mayor, one more card, Jerry Butler.
All right.
Mayor and council members, I had no idea that we were going to be allowed to say something after your work session tonight, so first of all, I appreciate it. I may not be able to do it in your 3 minutes. I'm not sure what's about ready to come out of my mouth, but I have lived here in this community for 16 years. I am retired, civil engineer, volunteer throughout those 16 years. I want to personally say I have worked with most of the staff in this town, and we ought to be very appreciative and fortunate to have them with us. They are doing a fantastic job. How they do it year after year, and we've been through it, I think as Vice Mayor Brown said, maybe 7 to 8 years now. They're fantastic, absolutely doing a phenomenal job. Tonight, I think I heard several things which are a little confusing. Number one was that there's some bright things on the horizon for the community, and that is fortunate to hear. I agree with everything that Vice Mayor Brown said. Those developments are out there. They're coming in. The question is, when might they come in? Then on the other hand, I hear that we have some budget problems. Some things were asked this year that cannot be funded, and I fully understand why. What I would like to see is a full summary from all of the departments for the things that should be done that are not able to be funded, because I think what that's going to do is to set the stage for the problems that this community is facing, and as Councilmember Lachey said, bring in some solutions. We all know what the solutions are. We need to find other sources of revenue. There is no other answer. We have cut our community to the bone. As we were talking tonight, we're talking about 5,000 here, 5,000 there. That's not going to solve the problem. We have a wonderful community. It's been great. It can even be greater if the community will step forward and take control of our destiny. I appreciate and want to compliment you as council members by balancing the budget, which I know you have to do, but to do it in the wonderful way that you have. This has not been easy for you this year, last year, and it's most likely not going to be easy next year. As far as the deficits, what I'd like to know is, do the deficits include those items that have not been funded this year, that didn't get funded last year, that we keep putting off, that it's just going to have to come to fruition someday? We're going to have to pay for those facilities. Transportation, our streets are a big component of what we're up against. We can only put them off so long, and then the cost is going to skyrocket. So, I know we don't have that crystal ball. I have lived my life as an engineer using the WAG system, and I did it pretty good. And I would say that rather than spend money to have more studies done to try to figure out precisely what the cost is going to be, I say let's go and use the WAG system. We're going to be low in some areas, we're going to be high in others, but I'll bet you when we get done, we'll be right on target. So, as a volunteer for the community, as a retired engineer, I volunteer to do whatever I can to help the staff with their WAG system. Again, thank you for everything that you've done.
All right. And on behalf of the staff, I know they really appreciate your words. They work very hard, and to know that everything they do for the residents is appreciated. So thank you. Anyone else?
No, Mayor.
No? Okay, then back to Ken. It is time for any motions from the council.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council. Again, I have 4 different areas that were brought up. I'd like to go through them to find out if I was accurate or not for discussion. One of them is that the movie in the park, music festivals, would like to be included back in the budget. Was it 13,250 was the number? 13,250 was the number that needed to be considered there. The other is the food bank. Really wasn't a number to that, but it was a direction to staff to ask that local board members be included. Third is the Economic Development Fund with the business attraction of 17,000 marketing, and where any additional funding should come regarding that, or if any. And lastly, the strategic plan and the website online payment were brought up for consideration on whether those should be eliminated or reduced for further discussion. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Why don't we start with the first one, then the movie and the park and music
All
festivals?
right. Since I brought that up, I will make the motion to return both of those to the budget.
Mayor, second.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
All in favor of the motion?
Mayor, I have a question
Okay.
of you.
Go right ahead.
Just a clarification. Your motion is clear, but where are those funds going to come from?
Well, I discussed it with the staff previously, and the staff recommended that the easiest would be for them to either take it out of the contingency fund or the $23,000 from MCSO. But their first suggestion was the contingency fund, and since I did ask their advice, I'd like to go along with that and take it from contingency.
Mayor, second.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor? Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
All right, thank you. Ken, what is our second one?
Economic Development Fund.
All right.
There was considerable discussion regarding that and adding to the marketing side of the business attraction strategy.
And, Councilman Magazine, did you say you wanted to make a motion on that one? That was your discussion?
I'm unclear as to, this would be adding how much to economic development?
I believe it was the 13,000,
That was 17, wasn't it?
well,
17.
no, it was, he did have 17 to work with, and then it was,
I think it was different between 63 and...
I thought it was 13 to bring it up to
Yeah.
30.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to move that,
71.
that,
Mhm.
well, I think it probably requires two motions. One would be to set the town's contribution to the theater at 50,000, would be one motion. And I will, you're looking puzzled.
No,
Oh,
No.
I always look
You
puzzled.
can do
Okay.
two motions.
That's a
if you
natural
wanna do it
expression.
that way.
yeah, they're related, and that the difference go to economic development.
All right, so we have a motion, which is to fund the theater for 50,000. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I have a point of clarification. How is that going to be apportioned out, that $50,000? We know that there's $28,000 coming from community services and $35,000 coming from the Economic Development Fund. So I'm just curious how that's going to be apportioned out to arrive at that 50,000 figure.
Well, I'm not going to speak for Councilman Magazine, but I believe he said from the
From-
35,000
That's
and with
correct.
the stipulation that it be returned back to the ED fund.
That's correct.
What would that amount be?
Craig, can you tell us what that amount would be?
$13,215, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's your figure, Councilman Magazine.
That's my figure.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
That represents a 20% drop in that particular budget, by the way, that figure.
Mayor, I'll second.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Maybe I need a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hanson?
Nay.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Nay?
Councilmember Magazine?
Aye.
Councilmember Yates?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger? Councilmember DePorter?
Nay.
And Mayor Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Mayor, the nays have it, 4-3.
I'd like to make a motion.
All right,
It's along the same lines, and hopefully I didn't miss it when you were going through the total of what we're going to talk about, but I'd like to, along the lines of what I said earlier, it's more palatable for me to suggest to look for an appropriate dollar amount, a 10% reduction in all 4 community service contracts, which would net a total of $13,300. Staying consistent with what we directed our internal departments to do at 5%, I'd look for our external and community partners to do the same. That's my motion.
All right, I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Do we want to know what those figures are?
I have them. They're
Okay.
probably not Craig-proof, but
All right, give us.
$4,500 requested by AZ Biz. Again, and I'll talk to the importance of each of these afterwards, but it'd be $450 from Jumpstart, $5,100 from Boys and Girls Club, $6,300 from the Fountainheers Theater, and $1,400 from the Posse. And I'm suggesting that, again, not trying to paint them all with the same stroke, but I think it's something that we're all going to bear the weight of it. And I couldn't agree more with each of the council members who talked about the importance of each of these groups to the town. And I know we didn't even mention Jumpstart, but it's really cool having an incubator in town. I think that's something we should continue to have. It's a sales point, and all four of them are. But those are my numbers. It comes to $13,291.
And you're stipulating that that money goes back to the ED fund, or?
I would
what-
say, well, I'd say part of my motion, I'd say go back to the ED fund, yeah.
Okay. Then we have a motion. Do I have, did I get a second? Are you I believe, Councilman Leger, you second that, but do you second it with the part, with the explanation and the part that he just added, that it would go back into the ED fund?
Yes, I seconded that motion, yes.
Council discussion? Councilwoman
So
Hanson?
just to clarify, that would be the second reduction in the theater budget?
No, I'm sorry. Mayor, I was basing it off of the requested 63.2, 5% off of that, 10% off of that, sorry.
But it's already been reduced once by transferring some of the funds back to the ED fund.
No.
That motion failed.
That motion failed.
Oh, ha, never mind.
Mayor?
All right, I have,
Well,
Councilman Mendes.
Just to point out that there's already been a reduction for the Boys and Girls Club. Wasn't the requested amount the same as last?
There was no reduction. It's the same as recommended, the same as last year. Their request was more than what was recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a motion and a second, and let's go for a roll call again.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Aye.
Councilmember DePorter?
Aye.
Councilmember Yates?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
Councilmember Hanson? Councilmember Magazine?
Aye.
And Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Mayor 7-0.
Good job.
What's next up, Ken?
Strategic plan, 60,000. You want that to be reduced or eliminated, or?
Councilman Magazine?
Yeah, to clarify, not eliminated. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Which one are we on?
Strategic plan.
Strategic plan, yeah, not eliminated. Reduced to 40,000 and held in a reserve fund until we meet with them and talk through the methodology they're going to use.
Where do you recommend the money go? My recommendation is back in contingency.
Fine.
Second.
That's part of it. That's part of my motion.
All right, so I have a motion and a second,
I second.
and let's go with a roll call.
Come on, a little levity's necessary at this juncture.
You wagged enough today.
Councilmember Yates?
Aye.
Councilmember DePorter?
Aye.
Councilmember Hanson?
Nay.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Aye.
Councilmember Magazine?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
And Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Mayor 6-1.
What's left?
The last one would be the website online payment, $40,000.
Ken, that number is only 15,000.
It's only 15.
I thought I read 40.
Madam Mayor?
I could've sworn-
So as a point of clarification, so it was never 40 in the budget, it was always 15.
That is correct.
So it's not a typo that, awesome, okay, thank you.
I
It might
I
have
don't know
been
where
a
I got that number. I thought I saw it in the budget.
Do you want to withdraw it?
I'll withdraw it then.
That's all right, it's contagious.
Hey, it's your first time with the budget. You've done great. Ken, anything else? The food bank?
Well, the food bank is
Is
just
there-
local board, no money was discussed. on reductions.
Just a recommendation.
To add some locals
Okay.
to the board.
Councilman Magnuson.
If I may, Mayor, I really don't want to leave this just a chance, just asking them to do it. I really would like to hear about any progress they've made within 90 days to increase the board by at least 2 Fountain Hills residents, and I'll make that as a motion.
I'm sorry, how many members are on the board?
I had that information, I think it's like around 6.
It's in the back of your pack.
It's 6?
It's in the back.
It's in the back.
Madam Mayor, while they're looking for
Councilman
that.
Yates.
Andrew, are we allowed to stipulate that with somebody else's board as to who, even if we're giving them funding or not?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Yates, I think as a condition of funding, if it's important to the town that the funds be administered by people who live in town, I think that's a legitimate condition to put on the funding. It's just, it's something we'll have to incorporate into the community contract.
I think that, I mean, if it would be okay with the council, I could just talk to Dave about it, and I think he would be really agreeable to doing that. I don't see, unless you want to do it.
No, that's fine, but if he isn't agreeable, I'd like to hear about it.
Well, yeah, I'd certainly, unless you want to, since you
No, you
brought
go
it up,
ahead.
if you'd
No, you
like
go
to
ahead.
talk to him.
Well, I already did talk to him about it.
Uh-huh.
But why don't you reinforce that?
Okay, well, I could do that. I don't,
Mayor, if I may, just in terms of some background information, the board members currently, it's in our packet, there's 4 board members, and one of them currently lives in Fountain Hills, one of them currently lives in Phoenix, one of them currently lives in Mesa, one of them currently lives in Phoenix. And if you look at their revenue sheet, and I think this is impressive, regardless of where they live, the board members contribute $3,000 a year. So I wouldn't want to give the wrong signal, and I think it's overstepping our boundary to be dictating to a board who their members should or should not be. But I would agree with you, a general conversation with Pastor Iverson, I think might be helpful if you'd be encouraged, but I don't want to discourage any of these current board members, and I don't think Dave is one of them. I think there's $1,000 contribution coming from each of these individuals. Thank you.
Councilman Yates?
I agree with Councilman Leger. Yeah, I don't like messing with someone else's. I mean, if it was a huge problem, we could discuss, but I know how difficult it is to get volunteers, so anyone willing to help, I don't care where they're from.
All right, I'll discuss it with him, and perhaps he'll just add another board seat. Another.
Whatever. This is one I don't feel real strongly about.
Okay, then I'll do it. Anything else?
Those are the only numbers that I have, Mayor and Council, unless you have anything else. It didn't change the bottom line. It just moved some around. So it's still $37,954,031.
Okay. So we're,
And tomorrow night was an if necessary. I'm not sure if you want to have an if necessary or not.
anybody feel it's if necessary?
I had will hors d'oeuvres be provided?
I had to ask.
All right, I think that's pretty much no.
Okay.
All right, so let me just say thanks to all the council for a great budget session. This wasn't easy to go through it, and I think we all did a great job. So thanks, everyone, and let me ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
And I'm sure everyone's all in favor.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.